What is scope creep and how do you prevent scope creep from happening in the project? Agile scope creep describes how a project's requirements tend to grow over time, goals, or vision changes beyond what was originally agreed upon. Scope creep is frequently caused by changes in project requirements from key stakeholders, not properly defined requirements, and additional features are added to an existing product, as well as internal miscommunication and conflicts. So, in order to prevent Agile scope creep, you first need a clearly defined project scope. In order to identify and establish your project scope, follow these 5 steps. Start with the why. Why are you and your team working on this project? What do you hope to accomplish? Knowing the size and scope of what you intend to achieve will help you define your project scope. Bring in your project objectives. Your project objectives and project scope are tightly linked. Your project objectives define the aim of your project, and they, in turn, have to fit within your project scope. Write down your project scope. Remember, this doesn't have to be very long. Your project scope is just a place for you to clearly outline your project deliverables and how they relate to your project objectives. Feel free to use bullet points, too. Review your project scope. Make sure you get buy-in from stakeholders, and that everyone is aligned on the project deliverables, objective, and scope. Make adjustments if necessary. If you weren't aligned in Step 4, take some time to rewrite your project scope. Before finalizing it, surface the document to your stakeholders again, to ensure buy-in. Here are a few examples. Project stakeholders want to prioritize different features. Managers or senior team members want to keep clients happy. Not properly defined requirements and additional features are added to an existing product. Not a clear product vision for stakeholders. Items in the backlog are not assigned accurate priority levels. Items in the backlog lack clarity and depth despite being a high priority. Teams are pushed into an iteration, or sprint, without clear goals. Changes are introduced or forced into the middle of an iteration. New features are rushed into development without proper requirements or cost analysis. If you prevent scope creep from happening in the project, how can you say that the project is agile? Because Agile is all about making changes to the project in an efficient way. In an Agile framework, scope creep is really a problem caused by injecting new or unplanned work into the middle of an iteration, rather than adding scope to the overall project. All Agile frameworks solve this through formal processes and ceremonies. In Scrum, for example, new work should generally only be introduced during sprint planning. New work that takes priority over current work required early termination of the current sprint, and a return to sprint planning. New work for the project must be prioritized by the product owner in collaboration with the stakeholders, so scope creep at the project level is managed through consensus that the proposed work is relevant to the project's goals. In Scrum, iterations are a fixed time box with a relatively fixed cost, excluding capital costs, but scope is a variable constraint. Scope creep in the traditional business sense of the term will extend the total runtime of the project. By adding scope to the project, you impact the schedule, generally making it longer. You manage this through transparency and effective communications with stakeholders. Kanban and Lean have similar mechanisms for managing change. The point is that there's no free lunch. Adding scope adds cost or time to the project. You can't fix cost, schedule, and scope at the same time, so the increased scope will generally increase a project's costs and schedule as well, while often reducing overall quality as the organization attempts to increase scope without increasing costs or extending the schedule. As a Scrum Master, you need to be able to articulate the trade-offs for the project. How do you handle developers who consider daily Scrum to be a waste of time and therefore avoid them? This can be quite a severe problem for the team environment. Such members can turn out to be quite toxic at their core and convey only negative vibes, ruining the team's spirit and productivity. Here's how you can address the situation. Privately discuss, with the team member in question, their motives and attitudes. Try to figure out what's going on in their head. Maybe they need to be further trained on the principles of Scrum. If no change has occurred in the developer's attitude afterward, it's advisable to schedule a meeting with the department manager. If you still can't align the particular developer's vision with your own and the team's, then it might be reasonable to reassign the developer to a different team, a Kanban team for example, where they won't be forced to step out of their comfort zone. What are the anti-patterns that a Scrum Master might fall during a sprint execution? The anti-patterns include the following: defining technical solutions, keeping the Scrum team dependent on Scrum Master, lack of support, assigning subtasks to the developers, flow disruption, doesn't educating stakeholders on the negative impact of disruptions, doesn't object that the management invites engineers to random meetings, doesn't oppose line managers assigning other tasks to the team members, allows stakeholders or managers to turn the daily Scrum into a reporting session, turns a blind eye to mid-sprint changes of priorities by the product owner. What are the anti-patterns related to the product backlog which you need to keep at bay? There are few anti-patterns that occur in almost all organizations: product backlog prioritization by proxy. Instead of product owner, stakeholders prioritizes the product backlog. Full product backlog refinement in advance. Scrum team expects and does the product backlog refinement for the whole project in advance before starting sprints. Oversized items in product backlog. The product backlog contains more items than the Scrum team can deliver, or the items are too large to accommodate in a sprint. Storage for ideas. The product owner is using the product backlog as a repository of ideas and requirements. This clogs product backlog and lead to cognitive overload and makes alignment with a big picture at portfolio management and roadmap planning level very tough. Order taking submissive team or non-engaged team. The product owner breaking down requirement documents received from stakeholders into smaller chunks without involving the Scrum team or developers submissively follow the demands of the product owner. No time for refinement. The Scrum team does not have enough refinement sessions, resulting in a low-quality product backlog. Too much refinement. The Scrum team has too many refinement sessions, resulting in a too detailed product backlog. What are the anti-patterns related to sprint planning which you need to keep at bay? There are few anti-patterns that occur in sprint planning. The product owner cannot align the business objective of the upcoming sprint with the overall product vision. The product owner proposes product backlog items that resemble a random assortment of tasks, providing no cohesion. Consequently, the Scrum team does not create a sprint goal. Unfinished work items from the last sprint spill over into the new sprint without any discussion. The product owner tries to squeeze in some last-minute product backlog items that are not ready yet. The product owner pushes the developers to take on more tasks than it could realistically handle. Probably, the product owner is referring to former team metrics such as velocity to support their desire. The product owner does not prepare the product backlog to provide useful product backlog items for selection by the developers. Few tips to avoid these anti-pattern. Don't force team members to participate in the Scrum retrospectives. It's probably the Scrum Master's fault for not making the meeting worth the team members' time. Developers should be fueled by motivation and inspiration, not by fear and order. Don't postpone items for the next retrospective. Suppose there's a blame culture going on during the sprint retrospective. In that case, you should take measures to prevent that from happening further down the road. Otherwise, your team might completely break up. What are the anti-patterns that a Scrum Master might fall during a sprint review? Anti-pattern caused by the product owner. Selfish product owner use sprint review as an opportunity to present his or her accomplishments to the stakeholders. Solution: coach the product owner on Scrum values of commitment, courage, focus, openness, and respect. Acceptance for user stories. The product owner uses the sprint review to accept tasks, product backlog items. Solution: ideally, the product owner should constantly communicate with the developers and adjust when the increment deviates from acceptance criteria. Unapproachable product owner. The product owner is not accepting feedback from stakeholders or the developers. Solution: coach the PO on Scrum values of commitment, courage, focus, openness, and respect, and explain why such behavior violates the prime purpose of the sprint review event. Anti-pattern caused by the Scrum team. No sprint review. There is no sprint review. Solution: sprint review is necessary to create transparency, so coach the Scrum team on the importance of these events in the Scrum. Too much documentation or presentation. Participants are not engaged due to heavy documentations. Solution: the foundation of a successful sprint review is show, don't tell, or even better, let the stakeholders drive the discovery. Following a plan, the Scrum team does not use the sprint review to discuss the current state of the product or project with the stakeholders. Solution: coach that creating transparency and receiving feedback is the purpose of the exercise. Sprint accounting. Every task accomplished is demoed, and stakeholders do not take it enthusiastically. Solution: tell a compelling or important story of interest at the beginning of the review to engage the stakeholders. Do not bore stakeholders by including everything that was accomplished. Anti-pattern caused by the stakeholders. Stage gate approval. The sprint review is a kind of stage gate approval process where stakeholders sign off features. Solution: probably hybrid Agile waterfall model is followed. Coach the stakeholders on the benefits of Agile principles and manifesto. No stakeholders. Stakeholders do not attend the sprint review. Solution: find the reason behind stakeholder disengagement, like they do not see any value in the event, or it is conflicting with another important meeting, or do not understand the importance of the sprint review. Then you need to convince them of the importance of the event and their participation. No customers/users, external stakeholders, also known as customers, do not attend the sprint review. Solution: invite actual users to these sprint review and engage them by allowing to use the product. Starting over again, there is no continuity in the attendance of stakeholders. Solution: coach stakeholders so that they understand the importance of sprint review and attendance. The impact of missing sprint reviews on their ability to provide in-depth feedback. Passive stakeholders. The stakeholders are passive and unengaged. Solution: let the stakeholders drive the sprint review or make it interesting by allowing stakeholders to play with the product. Why are the user stories not estimated in man-hours? One of the most common approaches for evaluating teamwork is to estimate in man-hours. While man-hours are simple to comprehend, they have a number of significant drawbacks. Few activities, such as legacy work, are difficult to estimate precisely. If one team member delivers the estimate but the task is completed by another, the estimate is useless. The amount of time it takes to perform a task depends on the developer's level of experience. Teams frequently overestimate the obstacles they may face and simply consider the best-case scenario. The benefits of estimating user stories in points include the following. There is no association between the estimator's skills and experience, and story points are independent of the story's author. The team members can estimate more correctly since story points are a measurement of relative sizes, and the size of the story cannot be changed by external forces. As team behavior takes precedence over individual conduct, story points encourages collaboration. The team comes together when they use planning poker to estimate story points. As teams exchange, constructively criticize, argue, and have fun playing poker cards to arrive at an agreement on estimations, It serves as a team-building activity. Differentiate between MVP and MMR. Minimum Viable Product, MVP, is a lean startup concept that emphasizes the importance of learning while developing a product. This enables one to test and understand the concept by exposing target consumers and users to the initial version. To accomplish this, one must first gather all pertinent data and then learn from it. The MVP concept is to create a product, provide consumers access to it, and observe how the product is used, perceived, and understood. This will also give you a better idea of what the needs of your clients or users are. Successful products are released into the market in stages over time, with each significant deployment referred to as a release. MMR, Minimum Marketable Release, is a product release with the minimal possible feature set that solves your customer's current new needs. MMRs are used to shorten time to market between releases by condensing each release's coherent feature set to the lowest increment that provides new value to customers. Can the Scrum team be involved in the product discovery process? If so, explain how. Making the Scrum team a participant in the discovery process early in the product development life cycle is quite beneficial. Agile refers to teams engaging with stakeholders early in the development process so that both parties are on the same page. Consider some of the benefits of early involvement. The development teams can help in modifying the specifications with the client by identifying technical implementation issues early in the process. Along with the product owner, the team begins to share a shared knowledge of what needs to be built. Teams can sometimes assist the product owner in detecting requirements that might have been overlooked. They have a common concept of what needs to be constructed. It also helps teams stay dedicated and confident, encourages them to take ownership of their job, and, most importantly, increases team spirit. To help with this, the Scrum Master can begin including the teams in early product discussions when the requirements are still vague. The product backlog can be built by the team and the product owner. Your team is failing to meet deadlines, and its velocity is volatile. What are the most probable reasons for that? How would you handle such a situation? Many factors make a Scrum team's velocity volatile: new team members unfamiliar with the environment and the organization's ways of doing things, developers leaving the team or getting fired, the team working on projects that aren't anything similar to what they've encountered before, unexpected technical debt and bugs, holidays, sick leaves, maternity leaves, scope changes. The product backlog is just a mess. Developers struggle with selecting primary tasks and instead end up working on secondary assignments. How can you as a Scrum Master contribute to sprint planning in such a way that the team is working only on the most valuable user stories? The Scrum team should never select user stories according to any kind of ranking established by the product owner or anyone else. Sprint planning is determining the most efficient path to value creation. The best way to accomplish this is to ensure that the Scrum team is involved in the product discovery process at an early stage. The product backlog refinement process is well understood by both the Scrum team and the product owner. This can be supported, for example, by the creation of a definition of ready standard for user stories. All user stories are created in a collaborative effort between the product owner and the Scrum team. A shared understanding and joint ownership is the goal. If a leader came to you and explained they were budget constrained and wanted to combine the PO and SM role, what would you advise? If they want to use Scrum, then there are 3 very well-defined roles. Combining SM and PO will not be effective because PO role needs to focus on product decisions. SM activities would distract the PO from that. Likewise for the SM role. Both the roles have different sets of activities and combining both will create a conflict of interest. I'd advise getting a coach to work with the team for a short period, and then subsequently after a few sprints again perhaps one of the dev team members will scale up to take the SM role with some coaching. How could you determine the success of Agile in an organization? There are no universally agreed upon metrics of indicators to measure that Agile is working. Every company or team should create their own definition of success based on the challenges that they are trying to solve with Agile. Here are some indicators to consider. Product increments meet client needs resulting in increasing product metrics, higher retention rates, better conversion rates, increased lifetime value, etc. Increased software quality, fewer bugs, technical debt, etc. More effective allocation of resources on high-value products. Team velocity is increasing to new plateaus in the beginning. Stakeholders more readily participate in Agile meetings, especially the sprint demo. Team members are happier and refer their friends to open positions in the company. Assess Agile team maturity, levels of maturity. Level 0, no capability. Level 1, beginning. The team has some passing knowledge from reading books and articles. They are not yet applying the knowledge or are applying it on an ad hoc basis. Level 2, learning. The team actively tries to apply knowledge from training, books, and coaching. Level 3, practicing. The team understands the practice and uses it regularly. Level 4, measuring. The team applies advanced concepts and/or is using metrics to measure their abilities and effectiveness. Level 5, innovating. The team actively experiments with new methodologies and practices and is using metrics to measure the effect. Is there a difference between Agile methodology and the Scrum Framework? Scrum Framework is itself an approach of Agile methodology for product development. Agile is a long-term process and Scrum is a slow-term process. So going with the Scrum makes work more efficient by breaking the system into sprints. These sprints help in delivering quality product in a short time period and adds the value for the subtle approach with Agile methodology. Their collaborative approach not only gives quality product but also helps to remove blockages very easily with high efficiency. Agile and Scrum are two different approaches, and so here are some differences between features of both of them. Agile development is based on the iterative and incremental approach, and with Scrum Framework it is implemented a way with which incremental builds are delivered to customer every 2 to 3 weeks. Agile gives a leader and Scrum is mostly dependent on self-organized cross-team functioning. Eventually, when both have a collaborative approach to product development, high-quality product is delivered. Agile is rigid method while Scrum Framework is rather a flexible approach. Agile asks for a simple design and execution of software product, but Scrum fosters innovative and incremental approach. The most elementary measure of progress in the Agile method is working software, but with Scrum, working software is not a priority. Customer competitive advantage through everyday work approach, technical advancements and adjusting the behavior is the principle of Agile methodology, which when structured with Scrum Framework gives a more incremental approach to a self-organized cross-functional team with the efficient performance for collaborative iterative development approach.